So welcome to part two, right? Obviously the laser cutter part. It's kind of a big deal just because normally, guys, you don't even get to ever touch the laser cutter. Honestly, at any other school, it'll be the operator who basically does all the touching, right? For the most part, what's nice is that you know that how the machine works, and well, at least at San Antonio College, you're allowed to laser cut yourself. However, it does come with some safety, right? And obviously I want to cover that today. That way you know what to do if something does go wrong, and you know the right operations to, of course, not only keep yourself and others safe, but make sure the machine remains not burned, right? Obviously we had an incident last time that probably goes, unfortunately, it was a student who didn't get this training and didn't even watch my free video, right? Of course, this kind of sets to update it because the last video was honestly at the SAC building and it was a little bit of a different layout and things like that. However, honestly, it's about the exact same with the video. And I misspoke earlier in the video. I said that blue was cut, so I ended up actually just switching those real quick. It's red that is cut and blue that is score for this machine and this machine only. Not a big deal, just switch the colors, right? All the other things remain the same, such as setting the line weights to hairline and all those kinds of things. But to be fair, once we open up that file, and it does open up pretty slow, give it some time. I'll keep Rhino 8 open, but one thing I would say about this computer in general as well, don't restart it. Don't turn it off, just let it die, right? Anyway, because it is one of those old computers that honestly takes longer to load than it does to like the amount of time you actually just need to use it, right? So, but that being said, I opened up Rhino 8 and I'll basically just keep that open, but just for the sake of the video, you'll also click on UCP, double click, and that really is the printer apparatus. Some of the things that you can note here is obviously the viewer, where it shows us kind of the visual representation of that. We have the system settings, which you never have to touch, and diagnostics, and again, you never have to touch those things. So again, we have the viewer, we have the file itself, and as you can see, we have 3,975 files. There's a lot there, right? That goes all the way back. That's every cut that's essentially been done on this laser cutter. So again, once you send it, it's kind of hard to take it out. I would say don't try to delete it, like nobody's gonna come and like find you. But one thing could be said, you see how this one's labeled X? Foodwood Halls, Model 1, Capstone, Lazar, Capstone, Lazar. It's just kind of the same thing. I wanna see some better file names from here on out. In fact, I'm gonna start requiring that you at least put your last name at the beginning, underscore, and then the file name. Because again, we need to start being more accountable for this laser cutter. Now, no, that doesn't mean that just because this gets burned or broken that even that person is liable. Even the person who broke it, who wasn't even supposed to be using it, to be fair, just a slap on the wrist. Luckily, we had grant money available and we were able to repair it for $2,800. But again, it might not go so swiftly the next time, right? Obviously they were at fault, but they didn't burn the building down, so I guess that's good, right? However, keep in mind, you want to put your last name, underscore, and then the file name. Again, we just want to be able to know who is here. That way, if somebody that even is outside of the College of Architecture trying to use it, we could easily identify them. Hey, you didn't even put your name right. We know it was you. Those kinds of things. So it's kind of more of a protection for you and the others around you, and more specifically the machine. However, really it's pretty easy. And remember how I was saying that rectangle is so important? Because again, it controls the paper size in a very literal way. Now for this machine, it's kind of nice because it's essentially a printer. Mine doesn't actually work exactly this way, but it's not a tutorial about mine, it's a tutorial about this universal laser system. So the first thing that we're gonna do is make sure that we have a 12:24 ratio. And the reason I say ratio is because this machine doesn't require exact dimensions. In fact, it works like a printer. So it works on basically the print file, or the PDF, if you will. And you know how the PDF is just one size? You basically decide what the paper size is, and that's about it. So in our case, we'll go to File Print, just like if it was a printer. And we'll not select Rhino PDF, and instead you'll go to this really weird name called VLS 3.50 whatever, right? To be honest, once I click it today, it'll go back to a default of, again, this 12 by 24 piece paper. It even kind of shows you that preview because, well, That's the only size paper, really. It's always going to be 12 by 24. Even if your material's a little bit smaller, it's still going to print 12 by 24. So that's important to know. And you can't really change that anyway. The second thing to go to is, of course, view and scale, or the view output scale. In my case, I'm going to select window. Now that's really important because now I have the window that I need. In my case, I want to make sure that I have endpoints checked. I want to select my endpoints and basically tell it that frame, and it's going, hey, do you want me to use this area? Are you trying to match that up? Hell yeah. I'm gonna hit yes and enter. Naturally, you should see the exact same formation and the exact same ratio. If you see something that's small or too big, that is not gonna print right. This is the actual scale that it is. In fact, you'll see that, in fact, it's disregarding the scale completely, and it's going to that window. So again, as long as that's 12 by 24, not accidentally 12.2 or 24.5, right? It really does have to be that exact ratio. It could be 12 feet by 24 feet, right? Again, you can still do your scale tricks like I've taught you, and you can still use this method specifically for this laser cutter. However, once you're done there, we'll press print, and absolutely nothing will happen because we have to go back to that universal. Right, so we'll minimize that one. You'll give this a second, and voila, it'll load that preview of the file that we have. Right, this is kind of like our print preview, if you will, before it goes to the laser cutter. And as I was saying last time, remember that the this, what is it called? UCP. Not the greatest acronym, but okay. You do have to make sure that it's clicked open in order to turn this on. So the first thing that you'll do is, of course, hold the power button. It'll turn on. You'll hear it kind of do like this 1996 AOL signing on to the internet sound. And what that's doing is, of course, calibrating. Just to go over what I was going over last time, obviously we have the laser cutter bar, which is known as the X bar, and the Y bar, right? Obviously we have two bars on the side. This is the actual laser cutter lens. So the way that it works is a CO tube in the back, and it shoots a laser and it hits a mirror. It hits this little mirror right here, right? And of course that little mirror goes to this little mirror and it shoots it down. As you can see, there's kind of a hint of a red line there. Keep in mind that if these aren't clean, they don't cut very well. And also if you see well, honestly, you shouldn't pull this out like I did, because putting it back is very tricky. It is quite magnetic, so you really can't go wrong. But one thing I would say is that little lens right there is about $320. So don't scratch it, don't drop it for the love of God. However, if you happen to have Q-tips and some isopropylene alcohol, such as fingernail polish remover, same thing. You can wipe that with a Q-tip, and you can usually clean it off pretty nicely and make it stronger. The same thing can be said for here, where you see a 2.0. That 2.0 stands for 2 inches from the bed is the perfect autofocus. That's what it stands for. So the tip of this edge of the red right there needs to be exactly 2 inches from the top of the material, not the bottom. And of course, I've made a little apparatus to show you what we're gonna have to do. So once we have the file there, and once we have our wonderful piece of material, which today hopefully will fit, I think. This should be okay. It's not gonna get all of it, but that's fine for today. I'm gonna wanna line it up to my ruler. And to be honest, by the time of this video, and probably by the time that you guys use a laser cutter, I'm gonna change this plate. Honestly, it's not supposed to be this plate. And the reason it's aluminum is because lasers don't go through aluminum. It's the only metal it doesn't go through. In fact, aluminum is so reflective that it bounces off the laser completely. For extra credit, does anybody know how we cut aluminum? Bless it. Water cutter. So instead of a laser cutter, we use a super high density water jet, right? That basically cuts large sheets of metal. And if you're driving a car today, you probably had one cut with a water cutter, right? So interesting enough, these machines have been around since honestly the 40s, right? However, now it's starting to be applied to architecture in terms of construction. Computers are starting to get better, and honestly, these machines are starting to get more and more accurate. What better way than to have accurate architecture in buildings by, of course, assembling them, making puzzles, right? For the lack of a better word. So we'll line up our material, make sure that it is lined up to these two bars. That is definitely important. And to be honest, this is a pretty cattywampus piece. I'm gonna try and use that 90-degree angle. This is also known as our 0, 0 point. right, which is in that top left corner. And you want to get it as far in there as possible and as flat as possible. If you have some sort of warped image, why does that not work? Right, that laser has to be exactly 2 inches, and if the board is warping even by millimeters, it's no longer 2 inches. Again, it almost works like a sword, right? And at that focal point, if you've ever been the guy to like magnify ants, you know that very well that at a certain angle it doesn't work. Excuse me, that's what I get for claiming that I killed those ants so long. But it's that focal point, right? So obviously the laser can't be too far and the laser can't be too close. It's gonna cut just right at a certain area, and that happens to be exactly 2 inches. So now that we have our piece there, sweet. The next thing that we need to do is, well, put the laser over there. I mean, right now the laser is on the bed. I need it to be over the material so that I can get 2 inches over the material. So first thing I can do right here, and it's kind of a weird symbol, but right next to this magnifying glass, which by the way means, you know what it means, you can zoom in. If you hit this one right next to it, it's known as the, oh, I guess it doesn't have a name, okay. However, you'll see immediately an X and Y grid, and you'll see where it's at right now, which it says that it's at 0, 0, but that's not the case. So in my case, I'm gonna go to the middle of the material, or where I'm about to cut. And of course, immediately you'll see the laser move to that exact position. So that's kind of a game changer, right? I mean, especially if I'm trying to find if certain pieces are maybe outside the range or the extents. So for instance, I open this up just to kind of show you what it's doing. Make sure it's always closed before you click anything, right? The reason I say that is because it can bend itself, right? It doesn't know that it's open, right? But for instance, I'm kind of curious. I don't know if I'm gonna get this line down here. So I'm gonna click on it down here and go, uh-oh. Let's see if I got it. It's not gonna reach my material. In fact, it goes way off base. Right. Another thing to do is, well, make sure that it's at 0, 0 as well. And as you can see, it's not even at 0, 0. So this entire plate is actually slightly off. That's not good. Let's see if I can fix that real quick. No. Let's home XY. There we go. So it's basically just going back and forth. And what we're trying to get to is that 0, 0 point. So let it do its thing. It's gonna go all the way across. It's gonna see its extents. And so hopefully you saw that I clicked on the home XY, right? Not home Z, because that's gonna make the board just kind of infinitely do something. So stop that if that actually happens. But we should be good. Oh, still thinking? Oh, it thinks the home is over there. Interesting. Oh, that's not good. Let's see what 0, 0 brings it. Okay, so it definitely knows where it's at. It found that 0. But it can't seem to find the top 0. I got an idea. I think it's just off. Let's try homing it again. After all the fixing and the shifting. Now it's on track. But yeah, I definitely want to show you that kind of stuff in the video too. Now that's a last resort. You really shouldn't push the bar, especially while it's on. However, if it's not really running, like while it's moving and you try and move it, that would actually break it, right? But in our case, let's try that again. 0, 0 point. Nope, still in the wrong spot. Okay. Well, we'll have to figure out some bugs, but in my case, I'm gonna line up my material to that 0 point then. Sweet. So next thing, we still gotta click on the material, and we still gotta use this guy. Now the way this works is essentially you want this bottom little ridge, if you will, at the bottom of this horizontal line, right? So at the bottom of this red plate, right? And obviously the bottom of this with the bottom of the material. So right now, and you might want to get a little bit closer, like right here. So for instance, some of you guys may be able to see, probably not where you're at, but you might want to see that there's two different flushness, right? There's definitely a dip in there. We want to get it perfectly flush with that red plate. So as you can see here, it is not flush at all, right? So in my case, I got to bring the bed down. I'll use this down arrow. Pull it down a little bit and see if I can get it flush. Right now, it's perfectly flush. So I'm going to lift it up just a little bit until it pops off a little bit. That way I know it's exactly 2 inches. All right, so again, don't lose this, by the way, because I'll have to 3D print another one. But that's looking pretty good. Last thing, I'm gonna close it. And of course, close this. The thing about this glass door as well is if you open it, it will shut off the laser, right? So if there is a fire, I know it sounds completely unintuitive, but if there is a fire, open it, because it'll immediately stop the burn and the laser from running, right? Again, that's why there's glass here. That way you can see if there's a fire or not. Now, why these 2 students that burned it didn't notice is because it was probably 4 o'clock in the morning. They were half asleep. Luckily, though, at least one of the students was here, and he just noticed a bunch of flashing. So he immediately tried to turn it off. Luckily, they didn't pour any water on it, because usually that's somebody's first instinct. For the love of God, please don't just pour some water on it, right? Or dirt or anything, right? If anything, obviously lift this up and unplug it, right? That would be the scenario. Now, hopefully none of you actually have to go through that. And of course, if you're watching this, again, definitely review, because you never know. And like I said, you should be always with a partner working with this anyway. So there goes without question, right? However, once we're all finished, we got to go to settings. And to be fair, this is usually not this long. I just talk a lot. We'll go to the materials database. In our case, we do have cardboard, and you're not going to necessarily see something that says, hey, this is cardboard, right? However, there are things that are natural, right? Such as mat board, or chipboard is another way of saying mat board. And you'll see that we have a couple of things here, like obviously cork board we can cut, mat board, paper, stone. To be fair, it's not going to cut through stone, it's just going to like etch it, right? Some of these things, they'll etch them rather than actually cutting through them. Keep in mind that this isn't the strongest laser cutter. It's about 30 watts. And to be honest with you, the most that it can cut through is like maybe 5 millimeters of basswood. And even then, it's gonna cut super duper slow. So don't count on like 1,000 lines the night before your models do, right? One thing I would say is, especially with the laser cutter, it does cut things really well and accurate, but at the same time, it's not always making a finished product. One thing I would say is that usually you want to sand down basswood once it's cut, otherwise it looks pretty black, right? You actually want to sand the top and the bottom because they'll be burned a little bit. One thing I would say about museum board, chipboard, or any other boards or acrylics, if you tape them first with matte tape, there's no burn marks. You do your cut, you take off the tape, and there's no burn marks. Again, that's a huge plus that not a lot of professors go over. They let you kind of discover that on your own. However, you tape the front and the back, especially that white museum board. You're trying to get it crisp, clean, clear, right? So again, you'd want to use maybe that blue painter's tape or even just your regular drafting tape. Again, more like the 3 inches. Don't sit there with like the really thin stuff, right? You also don't have to do the entire board if you're just cutting a small portion out of that piece. So do keep that in mind. However, for today, we do have cardboard, so I'm going to select the mat board. And it's probably about 1/8 thickness, so I'm gonna give it a thickness of 0.125. Keep in mind that it is in inches, so you will have to put it in inches, not necessarily something else. Sometimes I'll add a little bit of thickness, especially if I want the power to be a little bit stronger. So again, 0.13 is probably definitely safe. In my case, you'll see that we have our colors set here. So raster is black, vector engraving blue, and vector cutting in red. So again, definitely, we don't have any blue for today, so that doesn't matter. But very often I like to add about 5 to 10%, right, to my cut to make sure that it does actually go through. One thing I would say is it's okay to have like a little test piece and test like just a cut line to make sure that it's actually going straight through the piece. There's nothing like going through an entire cut to notice that it didn't even go through the page. You know what I'm saying? If that is the case, don't move the material a bit. Press play again and let it roll the exact same cut. It will roll the exact same cut. However, if I accidentally move it, or when I'm checking the material, I move it or slightly change it, I can't do that. I can't just press play again and it magically hits the same line. It's actually gonna make this weird kind of double clone image, right? Which you definitely don't want, and it'll definitely ruin the material by then, right? However, once we're done there, we'll hit apply, and we'll press OK, and we'll press play. Well, before we press play, we'll ask Patty to turn on that switch, if you can turn to that switch that we see on the wall.
The vent.
The
Is it
vent.
connected?
Should be.
Well, there's a vent tube down there.
Yeah, it's kind of connected. Don't get me wrong, we probably shouldn't get that on the video, but yeah, it's not the best connection in the world. And to be fair, it is probably a good idea when you are laser cutting to leave the door open like that. However, if there's nobody in here, what do you got to do? Close that door, right? Just because we definitely don't want anybody to mess with this machine or hurt themselves doing something that they have no business doing. Also, the fumes are pretty bad, right? So, kind of want to give yourself some ventilation. It's not that bad. You don't have to move. We're only going to cut it for like 30 seconds. But when you're cutting and you're going for hours and there's tons of models going, it starts to accumulate, right? However, we're going to press play, and you can totally watch the laser from the top. So if you want to get a nice view, and we'll press play. See how it's smoking a little bit? Totally fine, but there should be some better ventilation. To be fair, it's probably fine for our project, but yeah, not the best ventilation. It won't hurt you, it won't cause a fire or anything like that. And to be fair, that's not even something to be like super concerned about. Eventually, once it's finished. Now, I do want to pay close attention. You see how some of the flames are coming out of there? That's okay. Now, if it's a steady flame, that is not okay. And again, you'd want to open it up immediately. But it's burning. And it is paper, guys, right? I mean, it's like somebody coming in with like a sword. It's getting those little squares. That exhaust is abysmal. Hold on. Better.
Is that better?
Oh, that's oh.
Yeah, I think that's supposed to.
Yeah. You didn't even put it back
No wonder.
Better.
It's starting to click right, yeah.
Better. Anyway, so once it's finished, guys, obviously in this case, yeah, make sure the exhaust is actually connected. I think in this case, after the repair, he didn't put it back on. But as you can see, they got all the cuts. Only because we moved the board. Definitely not too bad. And it did cut straight through. Kind of lucked out on that one.
That's cool.
And there's my piece I need. And as you can see, yeah, it does make things pretty easy, doesn't it? Yeah. Cardboard's pretty good. It doesn't burn too badly, at least on the sides. And honestly, I kind of like the smell. But yeah, definitely works just fine. However, that was with an extra 10%, by the way. Right? You'll see that it does cut into this plate. Again, I'm going to replace the plate with that fancy grid. However, it comes all the way from China, and it does take a long time to get here. But yeah, once you're finished, obviously you pop out your pieces. And again, if you notice a lot of struggle with this is pretty healthy struggle. It should be a little bit of a struggle. You don't want it to just fall apart because usually that means it wasn't so accurate either. Another thing to keep in mind, guys, is look how thin these lines are. That's actually what you want. That means we had a good ratio of that cone. If it's too thick, that means you got a big portion of that cone, right? Whether that was too close or too far away, right? So I definitely want to point that out. Because some of these things you can kind of just tell. I mean, that's a beautiful cut. It's very clear that they just repaired this and they just cleaned it really well, right? It's got a nice thin line, things are popping out, and you see the cut on the other side, right? That's a good sign too. Now that one's pretty wonky, not gonna lie. But it still pops out, and cardboard's pretty forgiving like that. It's paper, so it's gonna naturally kind of rip a little bit. But again, this should be definitely enough information to get started, right? However, once you're finished, you want to leave this place better than you found it, right? So of course, close it back up, and you can leave it on, right? Totally fine if you just leave the system up and running. So, other than that, any major questions? Nothing. Excited? Don't burn yourself. Obviously, it's a pretty awesome machine. It can save you a lot of time. But also keep in mind that it takes a lot of time to set up. So again, you have to be either spending time in one area or you're in the computer setting up files and getting ready to print. Those kinds of things. Oh my. Anyway, we'll leave it there for today, at least in terms of the physical laser cut video. Let's head back to the classroom and go over kind of the second part. I want to show you some more than just topography.